What if one of the world's most terrifying monsters was inspired by a real human being? A ruler so cruel that people believed he had become something beyond human, something evil. For centuries, the name Dracula has been connected to blood, darkness, and fear. But how much of the legend is actually true? I'm Professor Carter, and in today's video, we uncovered the disturbing history, terrifying myths, and hidden truth behind Dracula. The year was 1462. Across the cold mountains of Eastern Europe, terrified villagers whispered one name in fear: Dracula. They spoke of a ruler so cruel that entire forests were filled with the bodies of his enemies, impaled on wooden stakes. Travelers claimed the air itself smelled of death near his castle. Parents warned their children never to speak his name after dark. But centuries later, people would begin asking a disturbing question. Was Dracula only a man, or did the legends hide something far darker? The story begins with Vlad III, the Prince of Wallachia, a region located in modern-day Romania. History remembers him as Vlad the Impaler, one of the most feared rulers of the medieval world. He ruled during a time when the Ottoman Empire threatened to swallow Eastern Europe. Vlad believed fear was the only weapon powerful enough to protect his kingdom. And so, he created terror unlike anything people had ever seen. Prisoners, thieves, soldiers, even political enemies were executed in horrifying ways to send a message. But as stories spread across Europe, the line between history and myth slowly disappeared. The name Dracula itself carried dark meaning. Vlad's father belonged to a secret order known as the Order of the Dragon, created to defend Christianity against invading forces. Because of this, his father became known as Dracula, meaning dragon. Vlad became Dracula, which meant son of the dragon. But in Romanian folklore, the word also carried another meaning: devil. Over time, villagers no longer saw Dracula as a prince. They began to imagine him as something evil, something unnatural, a creature connected to death itself. Many legends claimed Dracula drank the blood of his enemies after battle. Historians still debate whether this truly happened or whether it was propaganda spread by his enemies. But in medieval Europe, blood was believed to contain life and power. Stories of rulers consuming blood terrified people because it suggested immortality, dark rituals, and demonic influence. As these rumors traveled from village to village, Dracula's image slowly transformed from a brutal king into a monster that could never truly die. At the same time, Eastern Europe was already filled with terrifying vampire folklore. Long before Bram Stoker ever wrote his famous novel, villagers believed the dead could rise from their graves. These creatures were said to hunt at night, feed on human blood, and spread sickness across entire towns. During disease outbreaks, terrified families often blamed vampires for unexplained deaths. Graves were dug open, corpses were burned, and wooden stakes were driven through dead bodies to prevent them from returning. Fear controlled entire communities. By the late 1800s, Irish writer Bram Stoker discovered these old legends while researching supernatural myths. Fascinated by Vlad the Impaler and Eastern European vampire stories, he created the character Count Dracula. But Stoker's Dracula was different. He was intelligent, charming, patient, and terrifyingly human. The novel transformed vampire mythology forever. Dracula became more than a monster hiding in darkness. He became the symbol of humanity's deepest fears: death, temptation, immortality, and the evil that may hide behind a smiling face. As Dracula's legend spread across Europe, people became obsessed with the idea that vampires were not just myths, but real creatures hiding among the living. In isolated villages across Romania, Serbia, and Hungary, fear of the undead became so powerful that entire communities changed the way they buried their dead. Corpses were sometimes tied down with ropes, weighed with stones, or buried face down to prevent them from rising from the grave. In some cases, villagers placed garlic inside coffins because they believed its strong smell could drive evil spirits away. To modern society, these rituals sound terrifyingly strange, but centuries ago, people treated them as necessary protection against something they truly feared. One of the darkest periods of vampire hysteria began during the early 18th century. Across Eastern Europe, strange illnesses started killing people without warning. Victims often became pale, weak, and exhausted before dying suddenly. Since medical science barely existed, frightened villagers searched for supernatural explanations. Rumors spread that the dead were returning at night to feed on their own families. Panic quickly consumed entire towns. Graves were opened, and when some corpses appeared unusually preserved, people believed it was proof that vampires existed. What they did not understand was that natural decomposition can sometimes create the illusion that a body is still alive. The myths surrounding vampires grew even more disturbing with every generation. According to folklore, vampires could transform into wolves, bats, or even thick mist to move unseen through the night. Some legends claimed they possessed hypnotic powers capable of controlling human minds. Others believed vampires could climb walls like insects or silently appear beside sleeping victims without making a sound. These stories turned vampires into creatures that felt impossible to escape. Darkness itself became frightening because people believed evil could be hiding just beyond the reach of firelight. One of the most famous vampire weaknesses was the cross. Religious symbols were believed to repel creatures connected to hell and corruption. In Christian communities, people carried crosses, holy water, and prayers for protection. Another powerful symbol was sunlight. Modern films often show vampires burning instantly in daylight, but ancient folklore was different. Many early vampire stories claimed these creatures could walk during the day, though their powers became weaker under the sun. It was Hollywood, decades later, that transformed sunlight into a deadly weapon against vampires. Another terrifying belief was that vampires needed permission to enter a home. Villagers thought that evil spirits could not cross the boundary of a house unless invited inside. Because of this, strangers arriving after dark were often viewed with suspicion. In isolated regions, travelers were sometimes refused shelter because families feared they might secretly be undead creatures searching for victims. These fears revealed how vampire myths influenced everyday life, turning ordinary human interaction into something filled with paranoia and mistrust. But despite the fear, people remained fascinated by Dracula and vampire legends. The reason was simple. Vampires represented something deeply connected to human nature itself. They symbolized the fear of death, the temptation of immortality, and the darkness hidden inside humanity. Dracula was terrifying, not only because he killed people, but because he appeared intelligent, elegant, and powerful. He looked human while behaving like a monster. And perhaps that is why the legend survived for centuries. Because people realize the scariest monsters are often the ones that look exactly like us. As the 20th century began, Dracula evolved from an old European legend into a global horror icon. In 1931, Hollywood released the film Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi, and everything changed. For the first time, audiences saw Dracula not as a rotting monster, but as a sophisticated aristocrat dressed in black, speaking calmly with a hypnotic stare. His slow voice, dark cape, and cold presence created an image that would define vampires for generations. The film terrified viewers, but it also made Dracula strangely attractive. Fear and fascination became connected in a way horror had never done before. Over the decades, vampire mythology continued to transform. Some stories portrayed Dracula as a ruthless predator, hunting innocent victims in the shadows. Others described him as a tragic immortal, cursed to live forever alone. This shift made vampires more emotionally complex than traditional monsters. Unlike zombies or demons, Dracula often showed intelligence, emotion, and even sadness. Audiences became fascinated by the idea of immortality itself. Living forever sounded powerful, but vampire stories also revealed the loneliness and suffering that came with eternal life. Many modern vampire myths were created entirely by movies and television. The idea that vampires sleep inside coffins, fear silver, or instantly burn in sunlight became popular because filmmakers wanted dramatic visuals. In reality, ancient folklore varied from region to region. Some cultures believed vampires were bloated corpses with red skin, while others imagined them as invisible spirits draining life energy from victims. There was no single version of a vampire. The myths constantly evolved depending on local fears, religion, and superstition. Psychologists believe vampire legends became popular because they reflect hidden human fears and desires. Vampires break the natural laws of life and death. They possess beauty, power, and immortality, yet survive by feeding on others. In many ways, Dracula represents humanity's darker instincts: greed, temptation, obsession, and the desire to control others. At the same time, vampires also symbolize fear of disease and death. During centuries when plagues destroyed entire populations, people searched for supernatural explanations to understand suffering they could not explain scientifically. Even today, Dracula remains one of the most recognizable figures in horror history. Books, movies, games, and television continue reinventing the legend for new generations. Yet behind all the fantasy lies a disturbing truth. The Dracula myth was born from real human cruelty, real fear, and real historical violence. Vlad the Impaler existed. People truly believed the dead could return from the grave. And for centuries, entire villages lived in fear of monsters hiding in the darkness. The legend survived because it touched something deep inside the human mind: the fear that evil may never truly die. As historians continued studying vampire folklore, they discovered something disturbing. Nearly every civilization in history had its own version of blood-drinking creatures. In ancient Mesopotamia, people feared demons that attacked humans during the night. In Greece, stories spoke of undead beings feeding on the living. In China, legends described corpse-like creatures draining life energy from victims. Even isolated cultures with no connection to Europe created myths about creatures returning from death. This raises a chilling question. Why did humanity repeatedly imagine the same kind of monster across different civilizations? One explanation comes from science. Before modern medicine existed, diseases like tuberculosis, rabies, and plague created symptoms that looked terrifyingly unnatural. Victims became pale, weak, aggressive, and sometimes sensitive to light. In certain cases, infected people even bit others violently. To frightened medieval communities, these symptoms appeared supernatural. When multiple family members died one after another, villagers believed an undead creature was feeding on them at night. Fear and misunderstanding slowly transformed sickness into mythology. There were also shocking discoveries inside old graves that strengthened vampire panic. During decomposition, the human body can behave in unexpected ways. Corpses sometimes release fluids from the mouth, causing people to believe the dead had recently consumed blood. Hair and nails may also appear longer after death because the skin shrinks over time. In the Middle Ages, people did not understand these natural processes. To them, these signs looked like undeniable proof that the corpse was still active inside the grave. But perhaps the most unsettling part of Dracula mythology is not the monster itself. It is humanity's obsession with immortality. Vampires survive forever, untouched by age or disease. Throughout history, humans have searched endlessly for ways to escape death through religion, alchemy, science, and legend. Dracula became powerful because he represented both a nightmare and a fantasy. People feared becoming victims of the vampire, yet they were also fascinated by the idea of eternal life and unlimited power. Centuries have passed since the real Vlad the Impaler ruled Wallachia, yet the Dracula myth refuses to disappear. It continues evolving with every generation because it feeds on universal human emotions: fear, death, darkness, temptation, and survival. Whether Dracula was inspired by history, superstition, or human imagination, one fact remains undeniable. Legends only survive when they awaken something deep inside the human mind. And even today, somewhere in the shadows of old castles and forgotten graveyards, the name Dracula still carries the same terrifying power it did hundreds of years ago. Dracula may be a legend today, but the fear behind the myth has survived for centuries. From real historical cruelty to terrifying vampire folklore, the story continues to haunt human imagination even now. I'm Professor Carter. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the channel and join me for more dark mysteries and forgotten history.